So there's a specific digital drawing I made back in 2018, which was around the year I got my first tablet. And that I would annually redraw so I could see how much my art has improved over the years. And I've been pretty strong in this tradition, well, except in 2025. But to be fair, I was pretty busy with college and traveling for the first time to, really commit to it. But, that overall just limited the amount of art I was able to make that year as well. So for 2026, I decided to make up for lost time by turning my process of this year's redraw into a YouTube video. Yay! So the first question you're probably asking is, who are these people? And I'm not gonna lie to you, I don't really know that answer either. It's actually been a long while since I thought about these guys, and to be fair, their story isn't, exactly well thought out or even remotely sensical. I mean, as any OC story written by a middle schooler would be. The only thing I can remember about these guys is basically they were kids that got stuck in an art museum overnight because they were on a field trip or something, like Percy Jackson, and then they started becoming attached to random art pieces around the exhibitions, and then they would turn into monsters. But that's literally it. I never wrote a coherent story from that concept. I just drew a bunch of edgy, abstract pictures that had no definite meaning. They were, I'm fairly certain, loosely based off of the Vocaloid song Alice Human Sacrifice, which is about these people that end up in this metamorphical dreamscape called Wonderland, and then they get killed off one by one or something. I have no idea what that whole shtick is about. This was kind of another factor why I didn't do a redraw in 2025. The story was just becoming more and more undecipherable and just uninteresting, so it felt really boring to redraw them over and over again. But surprisingly, in a very slow progression throughout the years, I actually started forming somewhat of a coherent story. At least that would allow me to understand the characters a little more. So, just as a marker so I could, make their new designs, I decided this would be their new story. So basically, a group of kids end up in this museum and discover this blank canvas in a secluded wing of the museum that separates from any other exhibition in the building, and they become trapped inside this canvas where there's no civilization and there's no concepts, no rule of nature, just pretty much nothing, hence a blank canvas. And so after mindlessly wandering through this plain landscape, they discover that they can form anything they want with the tip of their fingers, right? But they're kids, so at least somewhere in their older teenage years, but still learning about the world and in the middle of puberty, which is the worst stage of your life. So once civilizations and nations and history start to form from their creations, they pretty much become or hold the status of gods, or I personally call them saints. I don't know, it has a nice ring to it. And when comes, history and civilization and the crushing devastations that come from wars and disputes, there's also the inherent desire for utopia. So then for 1,000 years, they try and form the best and non-controversial world in existence, where everything can live in harmony and be friends forever. But obviously, just like a real world history, that doesn't usually pan out the best. And so that's where the edgy god corrosion forms come in. Each kid becomes so enwrapped in their own version of utopia that they pretty much start becoming a shadow of their former self. So that's why for the redesigns, instead of using their human names, they start being referred to as the Saint of Blank. So for example, the first character in the lineup, I don't really remember her name. I remember it being Theos, because that's God in ancient Greek. I honestly don't know what I was thinking, but I'll just use that as a placeholder for now. And her whole shtick is that she believes there's no actual concrete concept of good and evil, and everything's too nuanced to be uniform. So that's why I chose to call her the Saint of Infinity, because she's supposed to enrapture the concept of the universe itself instead of anything truly labeled and solid. In her first concept, the antlers on her ears were pretty much just that, gothy, goopy antlers that I think were influenced by the wildebeest from Over the Iron Wall. But slowly over the years, they went from antlers to a strange formation of cracks in the universe. It felt really, forgetting the word, metaphysical, I think. And then the girl below her, I'm fairly positive her name is Evelyn, and back then she was just the typical yandere schoolgirl. But in this version, she's called the Saint of Pleasure, which means that she believes in the inherent nature of humans to be driven by pleasure, and that alone. So every choice one makes is for their own sake. She kind of sounds like if Marquis de Sade was a teenage girl. God, can you imagine? So instead of the typical yandere schoolgirl, I leaned her design to mimic a Greek goddess, or a folklorish nymph, or a mythological nymph, I suppose, since people with hedonistic sympathies usually reminisce back on the classical era of Greek bacchanals and wine, in reference to the cult of Dionysus. And then there's that vampire twink. I believe his name is Adam, and I chose to be the Saint of Destruction because throughout his design, it does seem as if he's slowly transforming into a cryptic creature. You can see how he goes from like this pretty blonde boy into like an eldritch being throughout the years I redrew him. So from that, I thought he would be the kind of character that believes, war and battle is the purest form of living there is, because he believes that everyone should feel the intensity of survival and risk. Kind of like a macho warrior kind of guy, I think. That would be like an interesting metaphorical way to explain his like slow descent into like a bloodthirsty monster throughout the years. It just seems to fit him. The fourth guy's name, I'm pretty sure his name is Brandon. No offense to people named Brandon, obviously, but like, can you imagine if God's name was like John? I decided that he would be the Saint of Sorrow, and it's pretty self-explanatory if you look through his, character designs. He believes that there's no meaning in life and everything's suffering and there's no point in doing anything, blah, 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 blah. But you can see from his old designs that he would always be surrounded by like a noose. And back then this was like the edgiest thing I've ever drawn. A guy getting hung by his neck. I thought it was like a tortured artist or something. I was 11, okay? But instead of adding any, obvious details of sadness, for his corrupted saint form, I'll call it, he's basically the Hades of this new world, where he wanders and collects lonely souls who pass from suicide and keeps him like this is his little cage for comfort. Something like that. But only for like suicide victims, I suppose. If you lived a well-off life, he'll probably just send you off. I don't know. But to me, he just seems someone who would be very like sensitive and benevolent. That's what I thought of his character for the longest time. And then there's the last set of characters, the twins, who I don't think ever had names. And for one thing, I didn't make them saints or anything. They're actually less corrupted than the other saints. I think it's because they're notably younger than the others. They might not be even like teenagers yet. So I decided to make them messengers, or something akin to like angels in modern religions. I don't know if it's in this world, but they follow the religious hierarchy of angels we have in, I think, specifically Abrahamic religions. But it would be cool to make my own. I'll probably do that later when their world actually becomes something that's actually fleshed out, but I'll save that for later. And that's pretty much the new story I have for them now. And so with this new story, instead of the kind of cinematic kind of scenery I started doing since 2021, I changed directions and made them look like a medieval stained glass you see of religious figures, or like these old pictures of old medieval manuscripts to fit with the new vibe. And that meant this would be the first time making the canvas horizontal instead of vertical. That was probably a contributing factor to why I couldn't come up with any ideas to redraw this piece, but but now that I see it, I don't really think I had to do that. Like, all I did was add some fancy borders and that was it. But maybe it benefited me to work differently, get your mind to work in different ways and you'll think of something new. I think the shift in scenic like portraits in 2021 really seemed to pave the way for the improvement of my art. I actually really think 2022 is the best one because of how I drew Theos back then. I don't know, she gives us a lot of aura. It does seem like 2023 and 2024 we're just trying to imitate it and not do anything new, which is also probably another contributing factor to why, I didn't really think I was improving a lot. It's almost been like a decade, and it would honestly be very embarrassing if I didn't see any changes since 2022. Although, I do also like how Theos looks from 2024. She's kind of giving Tokyo Ghoul. I really want to work on doing borders more. Just anything to try and make my art look more, fancy and maximalist. Try to study like Art Nouveau and stuff like that. I did actually find out from this redraw that I want to do more borders on my art. I haven't been drawing a lot recently, but letting my mind wander and make fancy patterns did really get my creative juices flowing. I also don't know if this will be my last redraw in this annual series, maybe until 2028, because by then it will be a decade since I started digital art. Maybe it'll feel more, ceremonial, but honestly, I think that would also be too much pressure, because if my art by then doesn't look good or doesn't satisfy me enough to be proud of it, I'll literally quit art. But yeah, thanks for listening to me talk about my OCs, and don't let teenagers become God.